Hi and welcome to Food for Thought and Natural Health Radio. I'm Deborah Walker, a naturopathic nutritionist by day, but I love to interview people who really fascinate me, and what they do fascinates me. And I'm really pleased to have joined me today Amy Garner, who's a psychic, a palm reader. Basically, she does the intuitive arts. It's probably the best way of explaining it, but she's very intuitive. She's a healer and an educator. And she offers what's called soul support for change makers. And that's really what I want to talk to you about today. Hi, Amy. How are you?
Hello, Deborah. I'm fine, thank you. How are you?
I'm fantastic.
Glad to hear that.
Perfect. Now, tell my audience a little bit about yourself, because in all honesty, when I was at school and we sat in our careers talks, they very much didn't talk to us about the intuitive arts. They were very much more interested even getting us into a job.
Of course. Yeah, no, sure. And I think that's one of the things that people who are very drawn to the kind of spiritual, intuitive side of life need to work on before they can kind of, they have to kind of ground their own energy in the world in a very practical way, often before they can go off then and explore these kind of other worlds and other realms and the more intuitive or psychic side of life, because at the end of the day, we all do need to survive,
Mm. And so what was tell me how you've got to this point in regards to your career and how you've developed it yourself.
Sure. Well, basically, I was given a book when I was 15, a palmistry book, and I've got hands a little bit like an old lady, covered in lines and lots of stuff going on. So I used to spend my spare time just reading up about all these different lines and the markings on the lines, the fingerprints and the mounds and the mounts, and it was just fascinating, like reading a book. And I was quite shy as a teenager, so I found it was a really good way to break the ice at parties. I'd just sort of take someone's hand and say, do you want a palm reading? And it kind of, I really enjoyed it, and people seemed to enjoy it as well. And then I got a little bit more serious about it when I reached my early 20s, and I ended up, by a series of coincidences, on Covent Garden Market reading palms every weekend for sort of about a year and a half, 2 years. And it was there I sort of cut my teeth on sort of dealing with members of the public, and again, just reading quite short readings, but getting lots and lots of practice in the various different ways of reading palms. And then I kind of gave it a break from my mid-20s onwards. I was I got a bit disillusioned with the whole sort of spiritual world. I was coming across, had a few experiences where people were not acting very ethically, and I just really started to wonder, is this really for me, this whole world? And I then went into quite a conventional career. And it was only I had this kind of epiphany about sort of 10 years ago, something like that, and gradually got drawn back into the world of palm reading and also healing. I trained to do Reiki. Since then, I've trained to be a counsellor, and I've done a much more serious course to educate myself on all the aspects of healing and all that kind of thing, and numerous other things as well. And I've managed to sort of integrate all of those different disciplines and kind of tools, if you like, into what I'm doing now.
It's really fascinating because you call it soul support for change makers, but in effect, you have got a number of, you've talked about the more mainstream counselling, but then, you've talked to me about the palm reading and then being intuitive and having the healing side. You really have made a really fascinating almost mould of different art forms into what you're doing.
Sure. Well, when I got qualified as a counsellor, I did try to just be a strict counsellor, and what I was finding was that I was getting quite frustrated that I couldn't bring all these other tools into the session, not for my benefit, but for the benefit of the client, because I find that they really do help to increase awareness, of kind of the bigger picture of a client's life, the underlying patterns, the things that the soul, in inverted commas, might be drawn towards, and also explaining a little bit, why are they having certain challenges? What is the gist of this? What do they need to get to grips with? What are they supposed to be learning? So I kind of, I qualified, and for a couple of years I just sort of kept doing it in the traditional way, as kind of very strict about, what the session was and what could be brought into it as I'd been taught. But then I just felt that actually it was not serving the client to use some of these tools, not to use these tools. And then with, I had to do quite a lot of work on my own confidence, because it was kind of going a bit into the unknown. I hadn't seen anyone else really trying to bring these in the same way. I did a lot of EFT tapping to kind of overcome fears and, to kind of trust that this was an okay way to go, that it was ethical and all the rest of it. I started to introduce it slowly into the sessions. It's depending on what this client has obviously signed up for, but at the moment I just combine energy healing, which is Reiki healing and theta healing, with the counselling, so people get a space to talk and offload, but also they get healing for the issues that they're bringing as well. And then I also do use the kind of, if you like, psychic or intuitive skills with coaching. So a coaching session typically might involve, say, 20 minutes of palm reading, or it might involve some tarot or some clairvoyance or perhaps an earth path reading. But it's not just being given a psychic reading, sort of here's the information, off you go. It's kind of here's the awareness. Now, how do we work with this, to help the client progress and heal and move forward with their life? And obviously I do still offer straight readings as well. And that's just the awareness part without the actual support that goes with it.
Absolutely. I think it's really interesting the way that you've brought them all together and actually created this pathway through them as well, of integrating what is wisdom and would have been. I consider that much of this would have been used previously in our society and has been used in our society, which isn't really talked about very much anymore in regards to all of these intuitive arts.
Yeah, it's strange. There is still a stigma attached to kind of being interested in these things or, working in this field, definitely. And it's interesting. It's almost like healing is starting gradually to become more accepted. I think everybody and his dog knows a Reiki healer or a Reiki master, and you get people chatting in Sainsbury's about their chakras and all the rest of it. So it is getting much more widely known and widely accepted. And I think you've written a bit about your, in your neck of the woods, there's a massive demand for kind of readers and the intuitive side of things. But it's one of those, it's a strange thing, despite being very popular and a lot of people having an interest in it, that it's kind of a little bit hush hush. A lot of people don't like to really admit that they have an interest. It's kind of a bit, not subversive, but it's just almost like maybe a bit of fear of being seen to be a bit of an idiot or being a bit naive, kind of back in the, being stuck in the dark ages or something like that, not being modern. A flat earther, that kind of thing, which is a shame. But I think, that has the reason people feel like this is, it's got a very long history, which is kind of quite understandable.
Would you want to go into that history? Because there's an incredibly long history going back centuries, isn't there, in these arts? And just enlighten us about that.
Well, it's interesting because palmistry, strangely, hasn't enjoyed the same kind of horrors of kind of repression as a lot of the other kind of healing arts, because palmistry has actually been used by a lot of royalty and the upper classes traditionally, and clergy actually as well, throughout the Middle Ages. And so it's interesting that that was very popular in the Middle Ages with astrology. So Sir Isaac Newton was an astrologer as well as being an astronomer, and palmistry was kind of the natural bedfellow. So it's interesting. I'm happy to talk about sort of how that's come across into Europe and the modern way of reading palms compared to the folklore side. But it seems that sort of kind of almost the role of kind of how can I put this? Almost like the intuitive arts based on hands-on healing and that kind of idea of the woman in the village that you go to talk to, the midwife or maybe the herbalist or someone that could heal with their hands or was known to heal with their hands or perhaps see clairvoyantly what was wrong in the body or that kind of thing. That's the thing that's really got stamped upon. And it seemed to... obviously there's the burning years, so, thousands and thousands of witches, females obviously, were, killed in Europe and latterly in the UK. It's originally for not being Catholic, not believing in the same God as a Catholic God. and if you worship nature gods, then obviously that makes you a heretic, and you would be burned in Europe and usually hanged in the UK. And this is kind of where it all, there's all this kind of fear of kind of being different, and particularly being a woman, drawn to these kind of things.
Yeah, well, there's been great suppression, hasn't there? And the thing is that it's still carried through now in some respects. We talk about mostly these people, these lay healers would have been predominantly women within the villages, but actually, if you kind of take this forward, the suppression still goes on now, because I was reading about how in medicine recently, because the amount of women coming through was much higher now than men, the feminisation of medicine was becoming a concern for them. So again, suppression happens. So previously it was the lay healers, now it's becoming the more science side. So it is fascinating that this has continued.
It is. I mean, it's interesting, isn't it? Because around the time of the Industrial Revolution, with the Enclosures Act, people were taken off the land. And I mean, it's just, I have this belief that certain people are drawn more to working with the right side of the brain. Other people predominantly use the left side of the brain. So the left side is associated with logical thought, it's rational, sequential, it's subjective, it's analytical, it breaks things down, it's very reductive. So it's great for any kind of research, science, medicine, that kind of thing, studying lots of details in a kind of sometimes a little bit of a split off way. And then the right brain, which is obviously the intuitive side, the psychic side, the creative side, is more about synthesizing. It's holistic, it's subjective, and that's the sort of realm of the intuitive wise woman, if you like, or certainly what I'm doing a lot of. So it is understandable why a lot of science it does not compute to be seeing the world in this way, or to be offering something that really just relies very, very heavily on the right brain. But I think what happens is that because it doesn't make sense, the computer says, no, I don't get this. Science can be very attacking of anyone that is working using more of their right brain than the left, because it just doesn't make sense.
Yeah, and the thing is, though, we can see science is having to change its mind slowly but surely, because, I've been reading just recently some research that's come out about how cancer patients who have got a far more positive outlook about their condition and about the potential outcome of their condition are likely to actually get through it and actually live far longer. So that these things are starting to come through from their own research, which is actually meaning that they're having to almost recalculate what they're doing. I feel.
Yeah, no, it's interesting, and the power of touch as well is now being accepted for infant care and care of the elderly. There is more scientific proof coming through that is actually really, really important. There's actually an institute in Miami where they're doing a lot of research in that area. So it's like, in some areas science is catching up. But I think what I wanted to say earlier, maybe not saying it terribly well, was it feels as though around the time of the Industrial Revolution, when people were taken off the land, this is when, great strides were being made in science and medicine. And that's when there was this sort of splitting away from the whole. So not only were people, metaphorically taken off the land, taken away from the planet, the whole, the nature, seeing ourselves as separate, becoming technologically advanced, which is all very the brain, not the body. And you could be argued left brain rather than right brain. So it's not holistic thinking. It's more detached. It's more like we must dominate and control nature. That's also the time that science and medicine got really dominated by, the barriers to entry were very high. So you had to have a lot of money. It was the preserves of the middle class and the upper classes, and usually male. So doctors really replaced became the person that you would go to see rather than the wise woman in the village. And, I'm not saying that necessarily that's a bad thing. There were lots of crazy old medical techniques, bloodletting was one of them, and lots of really horrific techniques for helping people medically before, science and medicine had this big boom several hundred years ago. So I'm not arguing against it in any way, but I do feel that women or the intuitive arts still have a role to play and shouldn't be completely dismissed. And I think maybe what's happening or going to be happening is that we're going to be accepting that there needs to be a little bit more of a balance, and that there is room for lots of different approaches to health. And it shouldn't just be, this is the way, and if it hasn't been proven, it doesn't exist.
Well, we cannot ignore people's intuition, because I know that when I see my clients, most of them will tell me in the first session what they think is wrong with them and what they shouldn't be eating, what it's doing to them, where they think it's affecting them. And the majority of the time, they are right.
Yeah, sure. And I think that's the difficulty, isn't it? Because, healing can be regulated, counselling can be regulated, but once you get into the realm of intuition, because it's so subjective, it's impossible, I think, because when I first started out, I wish there was like a body, like a regulatory body you could sign up to get like a little badge to say I'm a proper ethical intuitive, I'm working in an ethical way. But it's so hard, I think, for anyone to attempt to create some kind of a body, like the BACP or whatever for psychics, because it's working with unknowns, it's working kind of a little bit with the mystery of life, it's working with changeables, and it's also, as I said, very subjective. So it's not like a one-size-fits-all solution that you can give people. It's also when you have a connection, when someone comes in for a session with you, it's very individualistic, week to week and session to session. So, and again, I think that doesn't help the profession overall, because it's unregulated. There's always room for this kind of, sort of stereotypical. People get very afraid of being conned, or that it's full of frauds, or people just telling you what you want to hear. And there's not that much way of protecting against that at the moment, really. Especially as the whole profession is sort of, in a way, technically illegal. We're entertainers. We're not actually meant to be helping people in a serious way.
Well, I do quite like the white rabbit that you're wearing on your website, I have to say.
Well, I do like to not take myself too.
Since we're talking about entertainment.
Absolutely, why not? There's a fairy up there now as well, so I'll keep adding to the repertoire.
Do you think we've all got this ability to be intuitive?
I do, yeah. I don't think it's, you get these, I'm sure there are 7th or 8th generation psychics that's been handed down from grandmother to grandmother and all the rest of it, and credit to them. But I was born very sensitive. I was always being told, oh, you're too sensitive. It was always a problem, until I realised, oh my God, you can get a job as a sensitive. Wow. And it really went from there. So starting to use the way I am as a person for the benefit of not just myself, but other people as well. And then developing the psychic side of it just came out of there, really. It was just, I was drawn always to books about, firstly the I Ching, and then learning tarot, and symbols after that, when I wanted to learn to be more clairvoyant. But I'm pretty much self-taught, and I've also learned a lot on the job. I've done various courses as well, and you can't beat good teachers. It's always I'm soaking up knowledge from as many sources as I can get. I've read lots of books. But I think anyone can develop their intuitive ability. I think it's sometimes linked to how comfortable you are in your feelings. So if you are quite split off from your feelings, or you tend to intellectualize, or you kind of maybe quite defended against feelings, perhaps because of earlier experiences in life, sometimes it can take longer then to access the intuitive. But I just think it's a bit like playing a guitar or learning a language. You just have to practice, and you develop this kind of intuitive muscle. And as that becomes stronger, you just have to listen to it more and more. But anyone can do it. I don't think you have to be special in any way.
I absolutely agree with you. From your perspective, why do these systems endure? How have they managed to actually continue, despite what is quite an aggressive history of opposition? You've got, at one stage by the Catholic Church, they were called devil worship, and Henry VIII outlawed them. How have they managed to get through all of that, do you think?
Well, I think there's been kind of an evolution. So there's lots of different, if you like, probably not the best word, strains of palmistry. So it's got a very rich history. So, earlier than sort of 3,000 years BC. It was started off allegedly in Korea. It was there's still a tradition today of Korean hand massage, which is a little bit like reflexology, relating different areas of the palm to different parts of the body. And when that's massaged, it stimulates that area of the body, so the liver or the heart or the spleen or whatever. And I think that, there's a teacher in London at one of the adult education centres here, still teaching that. I've been on one of their courses. It was quite interesting. And also in Japan as well. And then it moved to China about 3,000 years BC. And that's when it kind of started to go into all the, the 5 elements and was linked to the I Ching and that kind of thing. And it's combined with acupuncture, a very strong link to holistic health. So it wasn't just about, future prediction, but actually, again, moving on from the Korean idea, it was all about how does your hand reflect your body. And then it moved into India about 2,000 years BC. And from India, it moved into Arabia and Persia about 6,000 AD. And a lot of it spread through the Silk Route about 100, I think it was 100 AD. Around 100 AD, a lot of, trade was going on, bringing all these kind of influences over from the East, more towards Arabia and the Middle East, and into Egypt. And in India, it was kind of written about in the Veda. So there's a Vedic text that rules the laws. It's the laws of Manu, and it banned explaining prodigies and omens by skill in astrology or palmistry. And it was saying things, so it's kind of got this, even in India, it's got this kind of mixed reputation. People still take it very seriously, actually, in India, and I believe China and some Middle Eastern countries as well. But there's also this slightly disreputable, it's like a bit of rejection by the main religions. But Aristotle wrote about it when it got to Greece, about 350 BC, as far as I know. So he was saying the lines are not written into the human hands without reason. They come from heavenly influences and man's own individuality. It also found its way into the Bible. So Exodus 13:9, and it shall be to you as a sign of your hand. Proverbs 3:16, long life is in her right hand and her left riches and honour. Job 37:7, he seals up the right hand of every man that all men might know his work. So there's this, sort of quote that's kind of God is in the hand. It managed to survive the burning years of the Middle Ages, and there was actually a monk in Oxford, Rodericus de Majoricus, and he wrote loads of manuscripts about palmistry, and they're still found in the Vatican today. So it's found in, loads of religions, Judaism, Islam, Native American traditions as well. It was actually on the curriculum as well at the universities of Bologna in Leipzig and Wittenberg until the 17th century. It was, very popular with kings, queens, clergymen and bishops throughout the Middle Ages. And I think that was helped by being brought back from the Middle East after the Crusades by all the returning soldiers. And then obviously there was this kind of huge revival in the Victorian era when the East English the English East India Company's conquest of India kind of brought back all that kind of rich legacy of palmistry as well. And at that time, as you know, there's all that kind of interest in table knocking, sages and psychics and all that kind of thing, mediumship, occultism. It was this huge boom. So the history is really, really rich. I think there was a big move in the Victorian times as well to make it more respectable. There was this kind of scientific approach. A guy called, don't even pronounce this correctly, D'Arpentigny, thank you, something like that. A French guy who did a lot of readings for military and scientific circles, and he tried to devise this kind of scientific structure of reading the palm. And there's a lady called Catherine St Hill as well. She formed this Astrological Society of Great Britain. But there was still, these laws in place dating back to sort of the 1500s that kind of banned, inverted commas, rogues and vagabonds from pretending or professing to tell the fortunes or use any subtle craft, means or device by palmistry or otherwise. And this kind of formed the Vagrancy Act of 1824, which still stands in law today. So technically anyone practicing palmistry is breaking the law. So, so it's survived despite the odds. And then there's there's a doctor in America called Dr. Richard Unger, who's an academic. He has done, so he's not a medical doctor, academic doctor. And he's done a lot of research over 25 years on the fingerprints themselves, and come up with this quite detailed system, again, fairly sort of scientific in relation to the other kind of more folklore-y or psychic ways of reading the palm, which breaks down into what your deeper soul purpose is, just from reading the combinations of prints on someone's palm. So he's taken it to this other level, and that's, you know, so it seems like it's constantly evolving, and somehow it's kind of kept alive by these kind of enthusiasts, despite being rejected by, you know, mainstream science, because there's not enough evidence to prove that it works. So I'm not sure really how it's surviving, but it just might be just that it's fascinating. I mean, I certainly find it fascinating.
And to be honest, when I started reading about these arts, I was totally drawn into them and just wanted to, you know, Amazon makes a fortune out of me, to be honest. And Kindle was the worst thing that was ever created, because in the middle of the night you can just go buy and it arrives. Yeah, what's really fascinating about palmistry in particular is as you're saying, it has wound its way through medicine. You know, medical researchers now use skin patterns. They study skin patterns, and you know, it's for psychology and behaviour in particular. And you've got like physicians like Paracelsus, which I actually didn't realise, but they talk about palmistry in their writings originally. So it's constantly wound its way through.
Yeah, sure. And obviously, you know, fingerprint analysis, that, you know, a lot of research on that by anatomists and academics throughout the, you know, 1800s. And the first bureau opened in Calcutta in the end of the 1800s, and then obviously in Scotland Yard and New York after that. And, you know, that all still stands today, that our fingerprints are completely unique to every single human being on the planet. So, you know, it's rich. It's rich for more research, really. You know, it does beg the question, why aren't more people researching the hands, really?
Yeah, really fascinating. Now, let's talk about the tarot cards, because, you know, this is an area for me that was... My mother used to go off and go and get her cards read, and in all honesty, they never felt very accurate. And then I had an amazing experience a few years ago with actually somebody who came to see me, and I actually said, you don't need to see me, in all honesty. And they said, well, in return, I would like to do a reading for you. And I, in the back of my mind was my mother and her experiences. But I said, yes, okay. And I recorded it, and I've never had anything so accurate. What she talked about, you know, what was going to happen next. She was absolutely right, absolutely right. Even things that I would never have expected to happen. And it completely changed my opinion about readings, in all honesty. And since then, I've been really fascinated by it, because, you know, and so when I started to look more deeply at the cards, that's what started to interest me, because originally, most people won't realise I'm actually trained as an artist and a weaver. So, you know, I'm really interested in the symbolism of what's encoded into the artwork. And yeah, I really like buying art. I love talking to the artist in particular, because for me, I want to know what they've put into that particular piece of work, because everyone is encoding messages in their work as far as I'm concerned. Now, how do you go about interpreting someone's reading, and how do you choose the right cards to use?
Sure. Well, I'm quite sort of straightforward with the area of tarot, because I'm largely self-taught, and I, you know, again, it's doing a lot of reading and then kind of learning on the job, really, and doing a hell of a lot of readings for myself as well. And what I was finding was I was trying to analyze the cards in terms of what I was being told that they should mean. And I found I was much more successful when I actually put the books to one side and just started working with the cards in terms of what I felt my connection was to this particular image. So I started off with the Rider-Waite, which is obviously the most well-known, I think, of all the tarot decks. But then I've moved on using different cards, and I'm actually using the Osho Zen Tarot card deck at the moment, which is actually, they're very beautiful cards, but they're quite simple. So the language of these cards it's not hard necessarily to decipher. But when I'm reading a card, I look at the meaning of the card, and obviously in its relation to the cards around it. but also I am getting or asking for information that's coming through clairvoyantly as well. So that adds another layer on what that card might be meaning. So yeah, I would advise anyone that's interested in tarot that's not using it at the moment is just to choose the deck that they are pulled towards. It might be an oracle deck, it might be angel cards. It doesn't have to be the traditional Rider-Waite. Some people can be quite intimidated by it because it seems very complex in terms of, all the layers of meaning and that kind of thing. But it really is just what are you pulled towards, what works for you, and you can always graduate from there.
I had a really interesting experience when I left my deck of cards out, because I don't do anything like that for my clients, but I do have a set for myself. And one day I just left them I have quite a long desk, and every single client who came through the door said, "Oh, could I pull a card?" And I thought that was really fascinating because, it comes back to our original point about the fact that it kind of winds itself through society, and everyone wants to have that pointer looking forward, don't they?
Yeah, I mean, it makes me wonder, you were talking at the beginning of this chat about the education system and how we're not taught this kind of thing in schools. And, there is, I don't know enough about it really to comment in an informed way, but this, children, they're so connected to this magical world, they're connected to being very spontaneous, and, they often have their imaginary friends, and they, some children say that they see fairies or whatever, they believe in magic, Harry Potter or Star Wars or whatever it is. And then that's gradually ironed out of us by the education system, and everything is geared just towards getting a job, as you said. And so I've kind of lost the thread of the question. I was going to make a very interesting point, and now it's totally disappeared. Oh, yes. So I think that there's something about all of this world that kind of reconnects us with a more childlike, magical part of ourselves that isn't cynical, that isn't overly dismissive. It's connecting us to that old wonder that perhaps we felt when we were a lot younger.
I think also we want guidance. I think that these lay healers would have given guidance. I think many of us now are, I think many people in our society are very much like me. We've had to move out of our communities to go and pursue work in other places. You leave your whole family behind. Communities have become fractured, as have families, and the natural support system around you is gone. And therefore, those people who would have given you the intuition, given you their wisdom, and just kind of looked at you and gone, "Oh, you need to do this," because they just knew that we've lost that. And I do think that, these ancient arts, the chance to go and speak to someone like yourself, is enabling people to reconnect on that level.
That's right. And I think also getting that kind of support and validation that's needed if you're away from your family or your community. And, I think you've written on one of your blog posts about people are getting more lonely and they're generally feeling more isolated despite this amazing thing that connects us called the internet. And it just feels like that, in a way, there's this rebalancing of kind of professionalizing a lot of things that actually just would have been freely available several hundred years ago. A good friend to talk to, a listening ear, a hug, healing power of touch or whatever. So that's why the increasing popularity of alternative forms of support. So whether it's counselling or coaching or having a mentor, for example, and it is, I think, becoming more acceptable to seek out that support, and also it is sometimes necessary.
Yeah. Now we're talking about intuition, and it's a massive part of what you're doing. You're constantly talking about it, and I think that we very much now almost override our intuition. I know I do. I have a great story where I decided to go to work. I was going to another location. I looked at all the weather. It said it was going to be fine. It had been really badly snowing. I filled the car with some bits and pieces just so that in case something happened. I drove 3/4 of the way there. I had this really bad feeling when I was coming off the roundabout, and all of my intuition was telling me not to come off this roundabout. I did. I went onto the last dual carriageway and I got snowed in. And not just me, about 12 of us got snowed in because a flurry came across and completely stopped the whole thing. Unfortunately, I had the gear to actually dig myself out, but that was about an hour, getting myself back off this. And I think that this is happening far more now. I think we know we know we have this intuition, but we're almost too scared to live by it.
And also, there's things like time pressures and shoulds. I can really relate to the story you're saying, and I never feel more angry than when I've gone against my own intuition, and then it's like, told you so, why didn't you listen? I get really mad with myself, So yeah, and maybe there's more of an acceptance as well that we are all energy, and there is unseen things that we don't understand yet. And and as I said earlier, just because science hasn't yet got the tools to measure things, it doesn't mean that they don't exist. And intuition can't necessarily really be explained yet, but it does work. And Einstein, a lot of his best ideas came from trusting his intuition or having a flash of intuition. The famous one is when he's in the bath. And a lot of scientists, I'm sure, work with their intuition as well, because it's their intuition that pulls them down a particular route of research, or draws them to really forcing all their energy to really investigate something that actually they don't really know what's there at the end of it, but it will be the intuition pulling them into the science.
You talk about you've spoken about the Earth Path reading. You mentioned it earlier. I've got a little note. It's way early. Tell me what an Earth Path reading is.
Well, basically, it's more popularly known as soul plan reading, and basically, it's the way that it was handed down to me by my teacher was it was a channeled system for understanding what people's deeper purpose is here on the planet. It was channeled by a gentleman called Frank Alpert in the 80s, and it's since been adapted by Blue Marsden to make the soul plan system. He's kind of expanded on Frank Alpert's original ideas. And the teacher that handed it down to me used to work with Blue, and has also expanded the system further in her own way. So the way that I'm working with this Earth Plan system at the moment is that you take somebody's name, their birth name, so it has to be exactly how it is on their birth certificate. And the idea is a little bit like the idea you may have heard of, that we kind of choose our family. So we come into this lifetime knowing that we're going to have certain experiences with the family of origin. And in the same way, it's as though we choose our name, because each of the letters of our name have a particular energy. The system's based around the Hebrew alphabet, and it's also sort of laid out around the Star of David. And the idea is that each of these letters and combinations of letters have a particular energy. When they're combined in someone's name, it's extremely individual, a bit like the fingerprint. So you have this very unique energy coming into the world, and it has to express itself in this kind of unique way. So what you do is just it's a bit of a numerological system. You tally up all the numbers, and you come up with this. Usually it's a star, sometimes it's a triangle if someone's got a very short name, and it's a combination of innate talents. So things that you can do very naturally, that are really fantastic, that are inherent to you, they can't be taken away. You also get a set of challenges which are here to expand your wisdom and awareness, to help you to grow and to earth, so to become, to help you gather kind of mental and physical strength in the world. And then you also get your soul kind of has these goals which it's working towards, it's pulled towards. And by working on your challenges, you can more easily move towards your goals. Your goals tend to happen in the second half of life, and you use your talents to overcome your challenges and move towards your goals. Often people come across or get drawn to having a reading normally between around 28 to 42. This is the age when a lot of changes happen. Things that are previously working in a person's life start to fall away. They look for deeper meaning. They have perhaps established themselves in the world in terms of their career, or having accommodation, property, perhaps a partner, that kind of thing. And then they're looking to kind of to understand more, what am I here to do? What's the deeper purpose of my life? How can I help? That kind of thing. So the Earth Path reading helps to break it down, the challenges, what you have to offer, and also your direction, where you're going overall.
Yeah, so just explain to me how you're using all these different aspects of things for people over a period of time. So what would be a typical a kind of an average approach? I know you're going to tailor everything for everybody, probably, but just give me a kind of a run through of how you would approach people.
Sure. So, well, it would depend, again, what the client came to me with. So whether they wanted counselling and energy healing, or whether they wanted intuitive coaching, which is a slightly more proactive approach, it's going less into the past, or whether there's another package which I'm doing now, which is kind of combining everything. So it's the healing, the readings, the coaching, and extra support outside of the sessions. And it would really depend on what they were bringing. So someone that might come for the big package that includes everything really wants to step up into the next the phase of their life where they're starting to really show their talents in the world, to be very authentic, to drop any masks that they've been sort of hiding behind. Often I've had a few people come who want to actually get more into using their intuition or working in a more kind of holistic, intuitive way, but are actually, quite scared about, what will mainstream society think of me and all that kind of thing. So it'd be working with them to overcome fear. Might be then introducing techniques like tapping, EFT tapping, where you can clear fears, phobias, limiting beliefs, sabotaging beliefs, things like that. Using theta healing, which is also really good for clearing blocks to abundance, clearing past life issues, clearing again, self-sabotaging beliefs, unconscious beliefs that the client may not know exist, that they may have picked up at various points in this lifetime or other lifetimes. And the systems, so the earth path reading, the palmistry, the tarot, are there to really give structure and a framework. So it's laid out kind of more in black and white, what they're actually working with and dealing with, what they need to overcome, what they need to develop, and what they need to move towards.
It's incredibly comprehensive. Now, in our society, why do you think that people have blocks to abundance?
That's a very good question. Well, I think that, life's been very hard for hundreds, if not thousands of years. And it is, I think there's also a lot in modern society that there's this kind of belief that to be successful, you have to work really, 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 really hard, 7 days a week. You have to sleep 4 hours a day. That's how you get on, kind of thing. And I think that it's interesting, isn't it, how technology was supposed to free us from being chained to our desks, but actually more and more people are getting kind of hooked into, whether it's social media or checking emails or having to browse the web. There's this kind of information overload and this feeling of I'm never doing enough. I've got to do more. I've got to do more. I think a lot of things are handed down generation to generation. There could also be quite a lot of guilt for having an abundant life. If perhaps your parents or your siblings have got very difficult existences, or they don't see things the way that you do, you might feel quite guilty about then having more abundance in your life. There can be all sorts of beliefs about the kind of people that are abundant, particularly linked to money. So a lot of people have these unconscious beliefs that, rich people are evil, rich people are ruining the planet, rich people are greedy, and therefore they'll block actually ever having money, because that will make them like these, inverted commas, rich people. So they're just a few of the reasons that people might have blocks around money or abundance.
Why do you feel that there's such a lack of authenticity happening with part of our society?
Oh, yeah. You mean like the Twitter selfies and all that kind of stuff?
All sorts of stuff. There's lots of things coming. You've got a lack of authenticity at political level for a start. And then it kind of goes through to the media, through to the social media, and through to individuals. Now, so it's almost like wound through our society, in a society like where we are quite abundant in some respects.
Sometimes I think that maybe, this move towards more authenticity is a reaction against everything else that's going on in society. So, some people say that the peace movement of the 60s was a reaction against the Vietnam War. So, you almost get like this, and the romantics in the 18th century, they were a reaction against the industrialization. So I'm wondering if maybe there's this, at the same time as there being this big kind of calling to be more authentic that many people are hearing, it can be a reaction against how many people see society as going, to kind of this very superficial, consumerist, kind of fake way of being.
It's coming back to, in some respects, intuition. Intuitively, it doesn't feel right.
Yeah, I mean, it's not getting us very far, is it? All this kind of fakery and pressure to buy. It's not having that great results. It doesn't seem to be making people very happy. Also, sort of more professionally, there's been this quite narrow definition of what it is to be successful. So it's to have the big house, fancy car, to have loads of money and all that kind of thing. But I mean, I'm kind of an optimist, and I think that might be changing, and maybe it's due to sort of more and more women getting involved in business as well. I'm not trying to demonise men in any way here at all, but it's sort of like, maybe it does seem like there's a lot more women wanting to dip into business and wanting to run businesses around their families, for example. And where am I going with this? I've lost the thread again. And sort of redefining what it means to be successful. So it's not just about having the latest trainers or having the most beautiful face on the internet or whatever, or the most perfect selfie, or having this charmed life that everybody's posting about in Facebook or whatever. It's actually, there's more of a deepness there, and it incorporates being able to work when you want and being able to take time off when you want, and to work around family and to put family as more central to your working life, not something that should be pushed to the side as though it's this big hindrance to getting on and being sort of successful in inverted commas. So, yeah, I don't know if that has anything to do with it, but that's just a thought that kind of came across my mind.
I think, I've been speaking to a number of people just recently, and in the last few years, I see a real change in the feminine energy. I think a lot of us are doing. I think our arena is very feminine in many respects with its energy. I think definitely businesses starting to feel that. Whether it's changing big corporates, I don't know. I don't work there anymore, in all honesty. But, I feel this surge. I see that women are starting to, I think an easy way of saying this is move into their power far more and understand that they do have that power. Now, would you consider yourself within this kind of push, one of the modern wise women, to kind of term?
Yeah, I mean, that would be lovely. I mean, I think I'm starting to accept it more, and I'm also noticing that a lot of my clients have the same archetype. So I'm attracting to me more people who have this kind of traditional wisdom, if you like. But I'm actually quite keen to reclaim the word witch. My definition of witch is a demonstrator of unorthodox knowledge, and that's what I think that I'm doing. And I am quite happy if someone called me a witch. I don't do any, devil worship. I don't do curses. I don't, ask for people's crops to fail or whatever. And I don't do spells or anything like that. And I'm actually not a Wiccan witch either. I have read about it, and I know a little bit about it and all that kind of thing. But I am quite happy to reclaim that word and take it back. So I'd say, yeah, I'm a wise woman, but I'm also happy to be called a witch. That's fine by me.
I think that's really fascinating. But mainly because I have a couple of friends. One of them's a bodybuilder. He'll know who he is. And if he wants me to do any work with him, he'll always say, could you come and do your voodoo on me?
Absolutely. And I suppose, that's there's still a lot of fear around the intuitive arts, isn't there? That, is it black magic, even healing, I've had some clients with fears about, but what is Reiki and what is this energy that you're using and that kind of thing. And it is understandable because to many people, it is still a bit of an unknown. I think that's the thing, trying to make it less of a scary thing, because intuition isn't scary. It's extremely natural. Everybody's born with it. It's part of who we are. We just need to kind of make friends with it, really, and not be afraid to use it.
Fantastic. Amy, I'm going to end on that point. It's been lovely to speak to you today.
Thank you very much.
Well, thank you for coming on Food for Thought. It's been absolutely fascinating to talk to you. Give out your contact details so that everybody actually knows how to get in contact with you for the soul support.
Wonderful, thank you. Well, my website is amygarner.co.uk, and I've got a Facebook page, which I'm just starting to build up, which is a Facebook/like Amy Garner. So thanks for that, Debbie.
And find out more about Amy on www.naturalhealthradio.co.uk. There's a blog there, there's links to her website there. So please come and find out more about her. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Debbie.